Some of the issues that kind of make transit challenging downtown are the location of the Marion Transit Center. It is in the very far north side of downtown. Before 2017, with some changes that were made, none of the routes from the north you see on Fowler Avenue and Tampa Street there, 4 routes, could get you into downtown without forcing a transfer downtown. Some of the changes made in 2017 address that issue with at least the Route 1, which is now the BRT corridor, which goes all the way down to Whiting Street, connecting with the streetcar, and has really made that more of an appealing choice mode for people traveling from the north. You can see how we kind of expanded our coverage and our footprint in downtown since that time, and kind of just changed the dynamic of the transit service within the area. A lot of lessons learned from that experience and those changes made in 2017, and some of the routes look a little similar to back then. But I like to talk about how one of the big needs in my mind is expanding and adding another transit center downtown so that more of the routes from the north can get all the way into the core with a 1-seat ride and not force so many transfers with everything going to Marion. Some additional background. We serve about half the county's total population within half a mile of one of our bus stops, and about 32% of the population within a quarter mile. You can see, based on population density, we do a pretty good job of covering the most dense areas. And I'll talk about how that's a challenge, and we can get into some of that with the Q&A, I'm sure. But it sounds like you may have covered some of that last week, so I'll spare the lecture at this time. The job density map you see here, it really tells a story about the places that have historically the region has wanted to connect, and the county specifically is really West Shore, downtown, and the USF area. Our BRT project is looking to address the USF to downtown connection, and future studies will probably look further into downtown to West Shore. A lot of folks like to talk about West Shore as if it's kind of this great TOD that should be connected today, but in reality, it's really a suburban office park, and it's very hard for us to serve based on the roadway configuration and the interstate, the way it kind of chops up the grid. But also, there's no charged parking, so there's very little incentive for anyone to use transit. And it really typically serves a suburban commute pattern, which our services are not specifically tailored to. The bulk of our ridership comes from very specific geographic areas based on population profiles, and it's really not tailored to suburban commuting, which is a less efficient service for us to provide, and is just challenging in general. Looking at poverty density on the left, and then a percentage of households per block group on the right, you can see this map pretty well demonstrates where the bulk of our ridership is: East Tampa, kind of the Heights in West Tampa, and of course the university area. Some of these more dense apartment complexes don't represent a lot of ridership demand, and some of those areas are probably pretty obvious to most of you. Moving on to minority populations, a similar story as the previous maps, but kind of show pretty well representative of where our ridership demand generates, except for the town and country area is not as big of a generator, but we still do have quite a bit of demand out there. So a little more background on our challenges, and number one is funding. We're often compared to Sheboygan, Wisconsin for our per capita spending on public transit in Hillsborough County. We have a lot of disconnected suburbs. We have a lot of single family exclusionary zoning. A lot of our suburban communities were designed specifically for car travel, and getting to the arterials that move a lot of the vehicles by any other way than driving is pretty challenging, and really makes providing a attractive service to anyone with the means to drive is very difficult. I touched on this, the costs and incentives. The only place we really charge for parking in this county and city are the airport and downtown. We have a decent amount of service to the airport, but most of that is tailored to job access. Downtown, we do see, we have some good service on the corridors I mentioned earlier. that can really attract ridership. But again, there are still very low parking costs. The city's done a really good job moving the needle on that front in the last year or so, thanks to some work by the Downtown Partnership and comparing us to some peer cities and showing how we kind of artificially deflate the private sector's parking costs because our public parking costs are so low. So it's a pretty tricky issue. It often gets very political, but we're headed in the right direction. As downtown develops, some of these surface parking lots are turning into some developments we prefer to see that are far more transit supportive. So we're moving in the right direction. I touched on the transit center location specific for downtown. And then, of course, we always have the challenge of the lingering Sunbelt transit stigma. And I think that kind of speaks for itself. I don't really need to dive into that. On our right, you can see the top chart shows our supply of daily transit trips in blue and the boarding demand in orange. So one of the things I'm proud of with HART is that they supply frequent service throughout the whole day. You can see in the orange that we do have two slight peaks in the AM and PM hour, but we really have one consistent hump all day. And that's indicative of not a lot of typical commuter 9 to 5 transit ridership. It's an all-day service for people working jobs across the board, a lot of different ways. So a lot of different job types, I should say, excuse me. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the BRT project mostly, but it is really closely tied to the streetcar extension project that the city has and the TOD pilot project that is under HART's direction. That is really, well, it's HART's project, but is really working with the Planning Commission, the city, and the county to try to see how we think things should evolve around the service that we're currently pursuing with the BRT project. So we originally looked to identify a corridor on Florida, some combination of Florida, Nebraska, and Fowler to connect USF to downtown. We want to improve safety and transit operations, operating conditions, connectivity for east-west routes, and improve the local transit access for communities up and down the corridor and on the ends. We started with 17 alternatives for crossing from Florida corridor over to Nebraska and getting up to Fowler. Out of those 17, the three highest scoring were Lineball, Palm Avenue, and Waters. Palm was seen as duplicative with the MetroRapid service, the 400 on Nebraska, but also there were some limitations with the development of the guideway that we'll probably experience the last go around with transit on Nebraska. So Lineball was the winner just slightly from Waters, and we were pretty happy with that because some of this work Steve will talk about in a few minutes kind of confirmed some of the greater potential on the Florida corridor, the parcel size, particularly north of Waters, kind of confirmed our suspicions about what we thought the best alignment was and how it scored for that matter. So the recommended alignment is basically a exclusive guideway or bat lane on the one-way pairs of Florida and Tampa leaving downtown, repurposing one of the existing travel lanes. The volumes aren't quite high enough to warrant the 3 lanes, so giving one to transit is something that we are pursuing. Going north, the constrained section of the corridor, we would be operating at limited stop service in mixed traffic with some queue jumps, particularly at Hillsborough Avenue. That is the main bottleneck on this corridor that we need to figure out how to get the bus closer to the intersection to get through. And then traveling north, passing Waters, the road opens up to 6 lanes again, and there's not a lot of volume for traffic, so we want to develop a median guideway from Waters to Lineball, and then again on Nebraska from Lineball to Fowler, and then a similar median concept is being vetted now for the Fowler corridor, but we are waiting. FDOT is going to have a PD&E on that corridor, so we're kind of going to wait for them to catch up to us with their PD&E and kind of have their process fully vet the concept for the guideway on Fowler Avenue. This would be what it would look like on Florida Avenue and Tampa Street as currently conceived. This is the mixed traffic segment from Hillsborough basically to Waters. This is what some of the constrained segments of Florida could look like, with a single reversible lane that would open up at station areas and for passing. And then where we do have the right-of-way, this would be the concept we move forward with for a fully developed median guideway. And this is a bit of what we think Fowler could look like, a pretty basic version of it. There are in the long-range plan, I believe they're showing the Fowler corridor go from 4 lanes each direction to 3, but for the purposes of our study, we showed it with the existing 4 travel lanes and the median guideway. Some of the modern BRT station elements that we like to incorporate into the plans are just nicely lit shelters, pre-boarding ticket machines. We probably don't need that based on the rollout of Flamingo, but that's something we just have to keep in mind depending on how that program rolls out and the timing. Security fixtures, real-time accessible displays. Level boarding is a big one to really keep our dwell times at each station very short, and typical trash recycling. And of course, bicycle and scooter parking is a big one now, and that's something I really drill down on for some of those smaller station areas along the neighborhoods, because we know that the primary land use off the corridor is single family housing, and the access to and from the stations can make or break whether or not it's an attractive service from a time standpoint if we're competing with people that mostly have automobile access. Looking at this slide, I really wanted to highlight the existing issues with the Route 1 service and what we think the BRT service would deliver. Some of the most heavily congested times are the PM rush hour out of downtown. A lot of people use Fowler Avenue instead of the interstate. And the travel time is scheduled from Marion Transit Center to the University Area Transit Center at 46 minutes. And during heavy congestions or an accident or a crash, on the interstate, that travel time can go up over 80 minutes. Similarly, southbound, scheduled at 60 minutes, can sometimes go over 65. Scheduled at 60, can sometimes go over 65, close to 70, because of some of that spillover from bad crashes and incidents on the interstate. And another thing to talk about, I kind of skipped over with challenges. Some of our best services, as I said, Nebraska and Florida, are directly competing with the untold capacity on 275. And it's a really tough sell to even if you have really good service for asking somebody to pay $2 to get on a bus when they can drive on the interstate for free. So I think there's a big equity component there that's a little bigger than our transit agency, but something that you have to think of when you're talking about a competitive option for people to choose between. Some of the ridership estimates are between 8,000 and 9,000. We're refining these now in this current phase. This was the planning level phase. The operating cost for the service is probably closer to $4.5-5 million. And then the capital cost is $95 to $120 million currently. And we're really looking forward to getting back to our board with the updates and moving this forward. We have a lot of supporting transit projects. We've coordinated with the City of Tampa and FDOT about queue jumps for intersecting routes and improvements for access, and then a ton of non-motorized bike ped supportive issues. We know that one of the big issues right now is some of the signal spacing on Fowler Avenue is a half a mile between signalized intersections, and Brandy can vouch for how difficult it is to cross Fowler Avenue in the morning rush hour right between those signalized intersections and get to the bus stop. It's not fun, and it's really hard to make our service appealing when you can't safely cross the street one direction during the day. And that's true up and down the corridor. Lots of sidewalk gaps, lots of bike infrastructure gaps. And we've got that all documented, and we've handed that over to the appropriate folks. So the current phase we're in is advancing the transit supportive improvements along the BRT alignment and identifying priorities. We're refining the project for a fully baked kind of capital project that could go to the federal process should we identify a local funding source. And then we're also doing a transportation systems management alternative, which is more of a low cost effort to kind of piece the corridor together a little bit over time. And we're eager to have that conversation with our board early next year. We've got a lot of things going on this corridor. T-BARTA's study for the regional rapid transit is on 275, the FDOT intermodal centers. There's a Fowler PD&E I referred to. Hillsborough County is resurfacing Bruce B. Downs now and doing some safety improvements. FDOT has the Heights Mobility Study, which covers 2 segments of the corridor as well. The Tampa streetcars in the southern end, and then in the downtown end of the line that is planned to take Jackson to Meridian down through the Water Street district is also in the mix with Thea's Whiting Street PD&E. And then, of course, the Cumberland Avenue, kind of one of the east-west heart of Water Street, is the new connection for Meridian, where we are hoping to have the end-of-the-line service. So it's no small feat for coordinating with all these projects, and that's been a big part of what I've been working on the last few years. And then just to give you a little bit more of a flavor about how this service on this corridor currently works, we've been entertaining a bus lane pilot concept with the city for a few years now. But we're trying to demonstrate the amount of transit service that's on the corridor and why we think we could probably warrant using one of the existing lanes with the existing service before we do one of these capital projects. So we're trying to have that conversation. But you can see there's 15-minute service on Route 1, 20-minute service on Route 6 in orange. The MetroRapid in green comes up Florida Avenue from Kennedy. And there's just a lot of service on those corridors. And I encourage you all to get out there and use it when you get the chance. It's a great way to get downtown, especially during special events, and connects right to the streetcar if that's what you're into.